Hello again. This is Legislative Update. I'm Representative Ralph Boehm from Litchfield. Our usual co-host, Erica Leon, fell sick, so she won't be here tonight. But we have a special guest, Keri Douglas, on the Budget Committee, who will give us an update on the 1.5 million shortfall with the school budget. So, Keri, can you bring us up to date of what's going on?
Well, to be clear, I am a member of the Budget Committee, but due to all the other stuff, I'm here as a taxpayer and a resident.
Right.
So anything I say will be my reflections as what's been discussed in public meetings or my personal opinion.
Right.
So it doesn't reflect anything on the Budget Committee itself. That's a big hole. 1.5 million. That's pretty substantial. And my understanding is that the school was able to trim that down by using unexpended funds from the previous year, which to me raises a couple other questions, like how did we have that much money available in the first place? But on the other hand, at least it dulled the impact of this. And then we tapped into the reserve funds. Obviously, there's a variety of opinions on that, whether it's the appropriate action or not. Fortunately, in one hand, it delays the impact to the taxpayers because those are money that's we already had in a fund. The downside is those funds had a purpose, and so we're going to have to replace them at some point. So while there's no current tax impact, I would expect that taxpayers will be asked in the near future to replenish those funds, especially given how there are a number of people who truly want a new GMS, and part of those funds were allocated towards that purpose. And then the other fund was for building maintenance. If something happened, a boiler goes down, a hot water heater, some major piece of equipment, that fund was intended for that purpose. And given we all know our buildings are aging, CHS is our newest building, and that's approaching, it was 20 years old now?
Yeah.
So we've often heard on a lot of our committees that there's some concern about some of that equipment. So we discussed that currently there is no impact for the last year's 1.5 million, but I don't know about you. I'd like to have a little fund set aside in case any of that equipment does fail.
Yeah.
And then we still have, that doesn't address the deficit we're looking at for this year. So we solved last year's problem, but we need a solution for this year because we've already tapped into our funds. So what's left? I don't know.
You know, one of the things I heard Monday night wasn't I ready to scream, but they actually had architecture, one of the things that we're missing money for all the architectures and plannings and whatnot for the LMS, what was going on there, and GMS. And one of the things that was said, they had an architecture firm looking at whether or not they could fix or add on to GMS. They didn't need to spend any money on that. We knew that 20 years ago. You couldn't add on or fix GMS. The DOE, Department of Education, said that. So that was a waste of money. They could have asked me. I could have told them. Well,
what was the reasoning behind that? Because my understanding is that it had to do with state aid. Like they wouldn't help us.
And the DOE already said that. You're not getting state aid.
Right. They wouldn't offer state aid to fix there. But if we're not in line for state aid, most likely anyway.
Right, not right now.
So
no.
would fixing the existing building or updating it be back on the table since state aid's not really on it either?
Well, the thing is that it's the water table problem underneath GMS, which is why you can't build in the same spot. Also, what got me, and I mean, 12 years ago, 13, when I was on the school board, we already had the replacement for GMS done. It was going to be put, and it was a bigger building, and it was going to be put in the space at LMS. Now, for all of a sudden, that can't be done. We spent architectural fees and everything for checking out that land and everything. So I've been in this town now for 46 years, and I don't know how many times we keep spending money for the same thing. Fire stations, for example, the school, for example. I mean, and it's like when a new school board comes in, let's start all over. You know, so there is not going to be any state money for GMS for a while. Okay,
So I think but you're highlighting one of the problems we have in town, right? It's institutional knowledge. When we change over a lot of people, we lose that knowledge, and so a lot of people so some places aren't comfortable with the research from previous groups, so they feel the need to do it themselves, or perhaps standards or laws have been updated. So I don't necessarily fault them for updating. I question. I've been very clear about my opinion about whether or not we need a new GMS. Period.
right.
But
Yeah,
whether or not it's worth researching, I mean, if technology has changed that allows a previously a space that have been previously unusable to become usable, then perhaps it would be worthwhile. But in some ways, sure, it does seem like we keep spinning our wheels.
Yeah, the problem at the GMS site now is the main issue of the water table, and it hasn't changed. And also, they mentioned water for LMS. We had to spend money to get the, the commercial water into LMS some years when it was built, because they couldn't find any water. They weren't looking for a well. They couldn't find any. It's amazing that the flood area, but that up a hill a little bit, they couldn't find anything.
Interesting.
That's Litchfield. You can dig for water in one spot, and like in the next house, there isn't any. I mean, yeah. So
I had no idea about that. So that's
yeah.
good. That's interesting information. Thank you.
yeah, but so that's why they had to bring in the commercial water now, Penachuk. But anyway, so
Yeah.
so that's one of the issues I see. Now, the question I have for you, I guess everybody on Monday was trying to blame the previous business manager, business administrator. Where did he go? Do you know?
I believe he took a job at a nearby district. Which one specifically, I'm not sure of.
My question is, does that district know what happened here?
It's been in the papers, so I would assume that. And New Hampshire's a small state in the grand scheme of things. I'm sure people talk. So.
Right, yeah. Do you know where we got our new one from?
Our business administrator?
Yeah.
No, I don't know where he's from.
Okay. Because somebody mentioned, hope he didn't come from Nashua. But anyway, the problem.
I'm willing to give him an open mind. Before I hang him, I'd rather give him a chance to prove
I don't
himself.
know where, but anyway, that's just rumor stuff talking around. One of the problems is, let's say you have a business thing background. And I already asked somebody else what the business was. I was hoping to ask Erica, because that's her thing. Okay, if you had what's the school budget? 20 million, 21 million?
Well, when everything's factored in, it's closer to 24.
Jesus. So if you had a $24 million company and you're on the board of directors, and at the end of the year, you found out that after everything posted and everything, you were in the $1.5 million in the hole. So, so what would happen to your CO?
Well, this is where I'm not clear on all the laws, because I had thought that at one point in the not too distant past, laws were changed that made like executives fiduciary responsibility. Like there was some legal implications if you had a shortfall that bad.
Yeah, but there wasn't
I don't know.
criminal. I mean,
no, I know, but some would argue that there's certain violations, but how far, I don't know. But I know that when I had to submit a budget report one month and I was $25,000 short on a $60 million project, I lost 3 nights sleep. So losing $1.5 million on a $24 million would probably have not been good for my health.
Right, that was the point I asked somebody and said, the first thing that happened, the board of directors would fire their chief operating officer. The same thing now. The superintendent is the head. Now, for those that don't know, and maybe some school board members that don't know, The superintendent works for the school board, not the other way around. The superintendent is the only employee of the school board. Everybody else works for the superintendent. So then the superintendent runs everything with the direction of the school board. So that's the way it works, and I've seen this, we've all seen this in other towns. I'm on the education committee and seen people complaining about it, but it works, and a lot of people say it's like the school board is working for the superintendent. It's the other way around, and
Yeah, the education laws, because I studied Ed 300 quite a bit over the past couple of weeks, and it's very clear that the superintendent has roles and responsibilities delegated to him by the school board. So
yeah, and that's the thing is in the law too. There's what the duty of the superintendent is, and that's one of the things I'm looking at is to maybe strengthen the duties of the superintendent to make sure he does what and also. Getting, and then on the Municipal Budget Act, making sure the Budget Committee gets all the motion. Because remember, I was on the Budget Committee. We still would be fighting with the school board to get more information.
So, I mean, the process seems, from what I can tell, the process in an ideal world would have worked great. Problem is, nothing ever works ideally because people get involved. So, that's where most wonderful ideas fall apart, is not the process necessarily, but the people. And that's not directed at anybody in particular, but in here, there were questions asked, and the law says that answers shall be provided, but the law also assumes that it will be provided, because there is no recourse if it's not provided.
Right.
So what happens if, so you can say, well, you have to provide this information to me, and then the response can be, or what?
Right.
So it would be, even as a taxpayer, as a resident, I would like to be able to see, well, what is that or what? Because it's clearly important enough, otherwise it wouldn't say it shall be provided.
Right.
And things happen. You know, we have a change in employees, and you know, things. Sometimes it takes time to bring people up to speed, but there still needs to be an what's the or?
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, that's always been, there's a lot of laws like that, and there's no penalty
Right.
if it doesn't. And the problem is, you can't really fine or penalize members of the school board. They're elected people, and if you start doing stuff like that, nobody would ever run for school board or any elected.
Right, so it relies on things working perfectly, and clearly we can see that doesn't always work that way.
One of the issues, though, in the state of New Hampshire, there's no recall provision for pretty much any state employee, in any town or elected position.
Right.
I mean,
But
no
there is
recall
two ways. My understanding is there are two ways that an elected official can be removed. One is violating the budget law.
Right.
And some argue that happened here, and others will argue it didn't. So I think the law needs to be clarified to indicate at what point is the law actually broken. Is it broken when you overspend, or is it not broken because we had a pile of money people were wise enough to set aside in the past for other purposes, and now since we could tap into it and we no longer have a deficit, we're now not breaking the law. And then the other reason is disclosing information from non-public meetings. Yeah. So sure, perhaps there needs to be a mechanism. And then even that, violating the budget law, it's not clear. It says through a petition of the Superior Court. But who does that? Can an average person, can somebody walking down the street say, I think the law has been violated, so I'm going to petition the Superior Court? Or does it have to come from somebody else? So,
well, that's been done a couple of years ago, even with the default budget. Because there's nobody checking the default budget. The school board, the selectmen can put anything they want. There's no check. Nobody checks that. Because, I mean, it's sent to the DRA, but they don't check it.
Well, and some of that is open to interpretation, right? So, what exactly can be in the default budget? Is it if I have 3 teachers, I can carry 3, even though I need 4, or I only need 2? Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff into open.
Well, there was a couple of lawsuits on that some years ago with a couple of towns suing, and it came out of the court that I think it was the school board, was wrong. They had to adjust their default budget. And I have another bill in this year for default budget. The problem is it's a bit different than last year's. Well, I'm not going to say what it is now because I had a big argument with the on our last day a couple of weeks ago when we did the veto day. And another bill I'll be coming up with is the Municipal Association was hounding me for getting information because they saw the title. And also for lobbyists. And I said, I'm not talking to you. I'm not telling you. And then they were yelling for a vote, so I had to run back in. Then he kept waiting for me. He called me up the next day. And I said, I'm not talking to you guys. All you do is go up there and lie. And which is what they do. And the bill passed the House, but we have a saying up in the legislature, the House listens to the people, the Senate listens to the lobbyists. Now, and which is interesting, the Municipal Association and the school board can't donate money to the senators on their campaigns, so I don't know why they're listening to them. Well, the other lobbyists they listen to because they get their campaign money. So for the Senate, we don't. I mean, it's kind of hard to bribe. You might say, or give campaign money to House representatives. There's 400 of us. How many are you going to buy? You know. But anyway, so I want to go into something else, and we should stay along. So you might give some input on this. On that veto day, of course, none of the vetoes were overturned. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, but we did break some rules or vote to change the rules, to override the rules, and we came up with House Bill 2023, which is the emergency aid bill. Okay, and because we had money left over, we had surplus money because the revenue came in more than was predicted. So normally that would go to the next year, but we thought, why don't we do this? Why don't we give money to a one-time, this is a one-time thing, to for electric and oil heating. And based on, in this case, 75% of the guidelines of the median income. So I spent this week, well, what does that mean? So the Department of Energy put out a memo, which I got, and then I found out what those numbers mean, and I got the numbers. So could you put those up on my screen? So this is what the state median income guidelines. Now, if you want to qualify for the state portion of this, there's also a federal one, which is 60%. So if you qualify this, chances are you're gonna, and I'll give who to call and whatnot on this. But if your gross family income, and that's usually, I think, line 11 on your income tax form, it's your gross annual income, is if you say have four people in your house, you have husband, wife, and 2 kids, and if the line is less than 93,676, you can apply for that assistance. Okay, if you have one person, it's 48,000, and we'll go through that on where to apply. So you can get those numbers, and so this is what where I got those numbers from. They're right. Fuel assistance. A one-time credit of $450 for heating assistance. And like my last couple bills last year in winter was $1,000 for my oil a month. And we know why this has happened because, and same with the electric, $200 on your electric bill, a one-time thing. And all that comes down to cutting the oil. We were energy independent, now we're not. All that caused by, in Washington, cutting the pipeline, cutting drilling and all that. So we're no longer energy independent. So we're paying for gas, and it's the same thing going to happen for oil and electric. Where's electric come from? Fossil fuels.
And didn't the new law in Washington also add additional taxes to those fossil fuels?
Yeah.
So our bills have gone up significantly, and now they're going to go up even more.
Right.
So
Because we need to, everybody needs to be driving an electric vehicle. And where the electricity come from? Fossil fuels. And in California, they're even setting hours when you can charge your vehicle. I mean, this is so insane. It's ridiculous. For example, one of the things they're spending money on is putting in charging stations for electric vehicles. Now, I can go to the gas station now and spend 5 minutes filling my tank.
Mm-hmm.
How many hours is it going to take to charge your vehicle?
It's definitely not. The technology, while admirable that we're pursuing it, is just, in my opinion, not quite where we need to be in order to mass roll this out.
Yeah.
You have vehicles. Are there mechanics that can service them? The people are running into that problem.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a number of issues that before we become this reliant.
Right. And the thing is, too, like, look at what happened last year. And we won't go back to 78, but back in Virginia, they had a blizzard, shut down the highway. And now if you have an electric vehicle, once your power runs down, and you have to leave the vehicle. Now, and you have to be towed. Now, if in a regular vehicle, AAA comes and give you a gallon of gas to get to the next station.
Right.
But so they even showed pictures of in California, somebody had carrying an electric generator on their Tesla, so they don't have to wait for the electric grid in California to get up to speed because there's not enough electricity being generated for the cars they want. It's totally ridiculous. And the same for oil. I guess the people that pass this, they don't have to worry about oil that much. But here in the Northeast, most of our houses are heated by oil or gas. I mean, it's not too much about that. So that's the problem with that. And let me bring up the next picture. Now here's the phone numbers. Okay, you can call if you see you meet those guidelines, and if you considerably less those guidelines, and you're at the same place, you can go and qualify for the federal guidelines, which is, I believe, a monthly thing. So at least if we can get, I understand the Department of Energy hasn't completed everything yet, but at least maybe you can buy Christmas presents this year. So with that money, but anyway. In Hillsborough County, I guess we in Litchfield would call the Manchester number, 603-647-4470, or maybe Nashville. If you call one, they'll tell you. Okay, so that's it on that. So hopefully we can cover that. Now, so you can stop your TV or your YouTube and get those numbers. Also, there's capnh.org/home that, do I have it? Yeah. About New Hampshire community action. And this also tells you how to go about applying. Now, what I understand, you have to go in. You call them, they'll tell you what documents you need, and then you go in and they'll tell you where to go. And hopefully that'll be up soon, and we'll be you'll be able to get some money to help. It's not going to be enough on the federal side, but on the state side, but maybe the federal. And that's a lot of people were against that because it's just a one-time thing, and it's going to hurt the budget next year. Of course, we won't have that money going forward.
Right.
Yeah. So and next year it's supposed to be worse. So anyway, now just a quickie on legislation coming up. Now, so what we're working on, Erica and I and others, is future legislation, parental rights
Okay.
for school. The parents are in charge, not the school, and school transparency. You need to know what your school is doing. Okay? Anything other than something criminal, you parents have the right to know. And a lot of that's not being done now. And so, also, just a quickie on the First Amendment. There's something called compelled speech, which has been found unconstitutional in some cases. Also, First Amendment, government employees do not have freedom of speech while they're on the job. In other words, the teacher can't teach what the teacher wants. The teacher's got to teach what the curriculum is in your school. Now, compelled speech is the opposite of free speech. Okay? Compelled speech is somebody saying, you have to say this. And that's happening in our schools now with the idiot pronoun stuff. Okay? You have to say what the teacher says. You have to call her or somebody else. That's compelled speech. And there's laws, that's been found unconstitutional in other cases for compelled speech. And there's some cases going on in the courts now of that. So, if Keri here says she wants to be called a he or an X or something, sorry, I'm calling you, I don't have to do that. That's compelled speech. So be careful of that in the schools. Parents, you have the right to say no. And if even if a child goes up to a teacher and says, I want to be called this, the parents got to know that. It's not the school's responsibility, or even do they have the know-how to even comply with that request. The parents are in control, and one of the reasons a lot of people are leaving public schools is because of that. With the education freedom accounts, if we have schools, they're going to drop out. St. Francis, I understand, is adding on, and other schools. So, and the public school, even though our population in the town is the same, pretty much as it's been over the last 20 years, how fast is our school population dropping? So, with that, hopefully, maybe do another show, and depending on what happens before Election Day, but our next one will be probably after Election Day. So, thank you, Keri, for
thank you
helping
for
out.
inviting me.
And also, I was thinking of maybe when you get into budget season, we can have you on just to give a short oversight of what's going on with the budget.
We'll talk to the budget committee itself and see whether I can be the face or somebody else would like that opportunity, or just whether it's something they even want to do. So, because again, I'm in the capacity as a resident and not as a member of the budget committee.
Me too. I'm not representing.
No, I know. I just want to make that clear in case anybody says, that budget committee member. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also a taxpayer, and that's what I'm here as.
Right, yeah, me too. Okay. So thanks again, Keri. And with that, right.